I've always had, and I still have this sense of like risking. I want to risk because why not? I could call it I got lucky, right? But lucky for me means, being prepared.
Yes, opportunity,
when the
seizing,
comes. I was working for Sony.
Okay.
I was shipping cars. I was managing my houses. And I started my company all at the same time. So I had no life.
I was like a black sheep, a bull in a china shop, and it was constant chaos. I created the chaos. People hated it. I was rubbing people the wrong way. As I've developed, I would say, yeah, that entrepreneurial mindset was there. People were like, man, that's a little risky. I'm like, that's the point. All right, everyone. Well, welcome to another episode of the Risky Assets Podcast. I have a good friend, Cesar Montoya, here with me. Cesar, thanks for coming, brother.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course, man. So I think I want to start, and just so people know, Cesar owns a company called Ringaro. We're going to go into like what you do, how you got there and all that. But I wanted to ask you, do you remember how we met first time?
I remember I was in a class at CSUN, Cal State Northridge.
Yeah.
And I the only thing I know is that you had some Peruvian in you.
I saw your keychain for your car, and it was an HKS one, right? Sure. So we're big car people. We still are. So Cesar more so, you've taken it further, right, with the car game. But I was like, oh, that's a really cool car. Like, what do you have? And I think it was the 300.
Yes,
300ZX. And I was like, that's sick. And I think you took your keychain out further, and you had a little Peruvian cholo on it. And I was like, what? And that was kind of just how we got to know each other through CSUN and then through, some of the car stuff. And yeah, so I'm Peruvian. I know I don't look it. You look Peruvian.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I am full Peruvian.
Yeah.
You're fake Peruvian.
I'm half.
You're half Peruvian.
At best.
I'm full on Peruvian. That's right.
And so we kind of had started to hang out at that point and just kind of, I was already married. So we was, it was hard for me to spend a lot of time, but we saw each other at school and whatever. So you have a good story for kind of coming here and all that good stuff. But yeah, so Cesar and I have known each other now. That was 14 years ago.
That's
I looked.
Crazy.
Yeah, I looked. It was
That's
crazy. We've had different journeys in our entrepreneurial path to get here. And, we wanted to talk through that. So with all that said, give us some background. Like, where'd you grow up? And then we'll work through the work stuff.
Okay. So, born and raised in Lima, Peru.
Heck yeah.
I moved here when I was 17.
Okay.
So
did you do your high school here?
I did 1 year of high school, and then I left high school before graduating because I thought I was wasting my time. But it was a pretty interesting transition because as a teenager in Peru or Lima,
sure,
who wants to leave their group of friends, right? Nobody, at least not me.
I would have thought it would have been college, but yeah, doing 1 year.
That's right, yeah. So I kind of did it early on. My mom was already living in the States, so it was an easier transition.
Sure.
And she was always trying to bait me in. Hey, come check it out. You're going to like it.
Sure.
And so I ended up trying it out, and I ended up staying, which I think is probably the best decision I've made in my life, coming to this country. It was not easy. I was living fun with my dad. Imagine all that fun, right, with my friends and just no rules in the house.
Yep.
But looking back, it's definitely the best decision I've made coming to this country. A lot of culture shock at the beginning.
You spoke English though, right?
I did.
Okay.
Grew up middle class in Lima, and so as you know, or a lot of people may know, there's a lot of access to private schools there because the free schools are just terrible. And so thankfully I learned English since young age. So that wasn't that bad. It was more it's
just a different way of doing life.
Different culture for sure. 100% different culture. I'll never forget I had to wake up really early to go to the school bus. And that was a thing that I never lived through. And it was like a big slap in the face. It's like, here, you're nobody. You have nothing.
Sure.
And you better wake up, take the school bus because nobody's taking you to school. And if you miss school, you're in big trouble, right? You're a truant.
It wasn't like that in Lima?
In Lima, you get picked up to your doorstep.
No way.
And if you don't wake up, they'll wait for you.
No.
So it's definitely
that's funny.
It's definitely a different sort of lifestyle. In Lima, you had folks that help you around the house. And so I never had to do my laundry, for example, or food. And here in the States, it's like, well, you're on your own.
It's expensive out
Nobody's
here. Yeah,
washing
it's hard,
My mom's like, I'm not washing your clothes for you, so you better do your stuff. And there was rules in the house. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't invite people really, or girls or girlfriends. And so early on, I knew I had to like escape the house as fast as I could.
Sure.
Right? So that was a short stint living with my mom, but definitely a shocking experience to do all these things by myself, and waking up to take the school bus was crazy for me.
And this is in high school.
This is high school.
Yeah.
This is like sophomore year.
That's crazy.
That is crazy. So that's definitely an interesting experience. And as I was in school, I was learning all these subjects that I had learned already as a younger student in Peru.
So they were further ahead in education in Peru?
In Peru, for sure.
Really?
It was a private school, right?
Sure.
So, I mean, I was already at the calculus level, and in high school, there was not higher calculus per se. So I had to go to college for that. So I ended up not graduating from high school and going and enrolling myself to a community college.
Cool.
While then at the same time applying for jobs, right? And knowing that I needed a GED or a high school diploma, because back then that was important.
Right.
If you didn't have a high school diploma or GED,
it was a non-starter.
You can't do anything.
Yeah.
So I was like, crap, now what do I do? So I enrolled back into adult education to get
That's so funny. I had no idea you did all that.
I know, to get my high school diploma.
Sure.
I didn't get a GED because it was frowned upon. Sometimes you're like, oh, GED,
Yeah.
it's not as good as a high school
It
diploma.
is. Yeah, I get it.
So I ended up getting a high school diploma while I was going to Ventura College.
Yeah, I actually remember some of that. Actually, you told me that. Okay, cool. So then you were at Ventura while you're doing high school, finished high school.
Yeah.
And then at what point did you transfer to CSUN?
Well, I did 2.5 years in Ventura College.
Okay.
I didn't know where I wanted to go. I was more focused on trying to leave my mom's house. So I was like, okay, how do I make money more effectively? Like, how do I work the same amount of hours as my friends but make more money, or work less but make more, right? That, and fueled with the fact that I liked cars already.
Dude, you were spending some coin on cars.
So I was just spending all my money on cars. My world it's looking back, this is so stupid, right? But
oh, yeah.
spending all this money on cars, racing cars. Me and my friends, the young friends that I had, I mean, it was just all car based. Everything was around cars, modifying cars, racing cars, car shoots, car meets, everything, right? Everything was cars.
I wasn't as deep, but I was so into it. I was encouraging you too. I was like, this is sick.
And I was 17, 18, and I was like, well, I need to make money, right? Cars, it's not cheap, especially if you want like a fast car and you want to spend money. So early on, I started sort of like getting into sales and opening up my entrepreneurial like mindset, right? And so while I was going to Ventura College, I started all these sales jobs, and I was doing IT work for old folks.
Okay.
I had little agreements with like old like folks communities, and I would go and fix their computers.
No way, that's fun.
And then post stuff on the newspaper, on Craigslist, and just fix computers.
Sure.
That's kind of how I started my little entrepreneurial angle. And then I just wanted to do sales, because sales was...
Yeah, that's where you make the money when you're young.
You make the money.
Yeah.
And so I started working at Sears.
Oh, man.
Sears, selling vacuum cleaners
No.
and sewing machines. So that was a huge experience for me.
Did it make money?
It made money. So
Really?
back then...
Again, we're 15 years ago now, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, it was like 16 years ago. I was making like a little over $20 an hour. That's a lot of money.
For back then, yeah.
That was I remember going over $20. That was just a lot of money. So I used to sell vacuum cleaners. When you work at Sears, in sales, they don't put you at like selling refrigerators or stoves or ranges, right? That's sort of like...
Yeah, it's more...
that's for the
top
older folks,
guys,
the top sales guys. And me as a young guy... who's this foreign guy, little boy coming here? So I was just selling vacuum cleaners. But in vacuum cleaners, I had a great fun. I had to think outside the box a lot of the times to sell vacuum cleaners.
Sure.
Like I had to bring my little like box of dirt that we didn't have, so I could do demos. And a lot of old grannies and ladies, sweet ladies would come. Hey, which one's the best vacuum cleaner? They would come with a little booklet, which was I forget what it was called, but it will review like...
I remember vaguely.
I don't know if it's Writer's Digest or Reader's Digest.
It
or
might have
like
been.
that.
I know what you're talking about.
But it was a membership. You had to pay for it to get access to that. So they will come with a little booklet and they go, oh, I want this Kenmore. And so I'll be like, oh, I have it right here. And then I would do like a little test run. And one of these things, like I like to think outside the box. So one of these angles I took was I ended up buying a couple of vacuum cleaners myself.
Okay.
And I would store them at Sears in my locker room. Like there's like a little kind of thing,
Sure.
closet. And when someone, a prospect, wasn't sure on a vacuum cleaner, I would say, hey, look, I have one. Take it home for a week. Bring it back and let me know if you like it. And if you like it, come see me and we'll sell you one. And I would just do that. And people would just take the vacuum cleaner thinking that maybe it's like a Sears thing.
One, yeah.
And like, but they didn't know I bought it on my own dime. And they will come back looking for me and then I'd make the sale, right? Dysons were also starting to be popular there, and the commissions on those were crazy. And so you just had to kind of show them, hey, look, a Dyson is a lot more money, but look, it cleans a lot better.
So nice. Right, that's cool.
And it didn't have bags and all that. But anyways, a funny, interesting story with Sears is I was stuck in vacuum cleaners, and a lot of the times I saw the older coworkers, you know, the people that have been there for a while, selling the refrigerators, the stoves, the ranges, being busy all the time, helping customers, and customers waiting for them to be sold a refrigerator or a range or something, right? And me selling vacuums,
you had free time.
I had free time, and I was like, I need to help these guys. So eventually, I started to learn how to sell them, but I wasn't really supposed to sell them.
Sure.
So I at that point, I didn't really care. I just wanted to make money, and I wanted to help customers. And I got in trouble a few times. So funny enough, they would just tell the manager, hey, this guy is selling our stuff. We're losing our commission, and he's not trained to do that, right? And I went to upper management and said, look, guys, there's customers waiting. If we don't help them, they're going to leave.
Walk out.
They're going to walk out. Yeah. They're not going to make the sale. And why not? I'm just doing nothing. And it's not that hard. And funny enough, that sort of kind of helped Sears start their cross-selling department, process. It wasn't a thing before. And then as I've always been greedy and kind of breaking the rules. I'll be honest.
Entrepreneurs are like that, man. They want to bend the rules a little bit.
Bend the rules, and it was just best for me and for the business. And so I gained a few enemies, but I could care less.
Yeah,
I was just trying to make sales.
So funny. Well, so I always have like that entry level. I started at a portable toilet company, which when you met me, I think I was working at a portable toilet company. I was selling portable toilets. I remember being like, man, this job isn't great, but I learned a lot from the skill set of like, if you can sell that.
So porta potties, right?
Porta potties, bro.
That's great.
And then it kind of transitioned from like what you would think is like the plastic porta potties to the high end ones for production companies, right? On the trailer, and it's got the fancy. Yeah. So it's still a toilet, But I remember a lot of those skills of having to be creative and how to talk to people properly, or like how to position yourself for a sale. Like it mattered. Right. It's hard to sell that stuff.
It's hard,
I don't know about vacuum cleaners being that difficult, but certainly like all those skills, like they're important. You don't get that in school. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
So, and you were doing that during college when you were at Ventura.
I was doing it during college. Then I was selling cell phones. I worked for Verizon, which was also a great job as a young kid.
I tried to get that job when I was in college, man. Those were good jobs.
Selling cell phones, that was great. I mean, great money for being 20 years old.
Totally.
Literally, people had careers back then working at.
I remember these Verizon guys were recruiting. Like, you're making what?
Exactly. 100%.
These dudes making, exactly.
They had houses. I was like, what?
It's incredible.
And so that was great for me. So I was going to Ventura College full time, working full time, and I knew I needed to go to college. I knew I needed to get a higher education, a degree.
Yeah.
And so when time came, I just applied to a few colleges. I got accepted to a few, including like San Diego State.
Sure.
But they were so far, and I didn't have the money to move there. So I just decided for a commuter school. And so I went to CSUN, which is, I was living in Ventura then. So CSUN's 45 minutes away. And so I would just drive to school. So commute to school.
Not too crazy.
Nothing too crazy.
Yeah.
I did that for 2 years. And the last year, I ended up moving to the Valley.
Right.
To be closer to school and to any
And
possible jobs.
were you working at Verizon still through that?
I was working in Ventura. So basically all my life was in Ventura. And I was just going to school at CSUN and coming back.
Still had the job at Verizon.
I had the job at Verizon.
All the way through college.
I went back to Sears as well for a few months. Then while I was going to college at CSUN, I had a short stint with an aerospace company called HRT Textron here in Santa Clarita.
Okay.
So I was in procurement. This is the first time I learned about ERP software and SAP.
Right, SAP is a big one. Yeah.
So doing procurement there, and as soon as I graduated college, that was a paid internship. I had a few paid internships. Then I went to, I was working in El Segundo, in Carson, selling Caterpillar parts.
Oh, you're just going for it.
I did all kinds of things. And then I graduated college. And so my first job out of college was working for Penske. As a Penske management trainee.
The car rental like Penske?
The truck rental.
Oh, the truck rental. That's what it is. Yeah.
So that was a total different ball game. I mean, it was a great experience as well. But you had to go to a yard.
Totally.
Early in the morning. I hated going like at 5 in the morning.
Construction mostly stuff, right?
I hate Sun Valley.
Oh, dude, I know
cold
that yard.
In winter, hot in summer. You had to take inventory physical, or like you had to walk blocks and take inventory of all these like semi trucks and all these 26 footers, 24 footers, 16 footers.
How long did you do that for?
I did it for a year and a half. So that was, and it was great money then.
Okay.
So that sort of kind of catapulted me on like what's the next step, right? And so after Penske, I started selling avocados.
I didn't know this either. Avocados.
I worked for Mission Produce. I wasn't selling them. I was more like operating the operation.
Sure.
So I was managing their inventory.
Sure.
So I had to sort of send certain types of avocados, certain warehouses, and kind of analyze the shelf life of certain avocados, and it's just interesting, right?
That's kind of cool. Yeah.
That was it was like a 6-month stint.
Okay.
And at the same time, I was always applying for jobs. And I think something that changed my life was working for Sony, because right after that, I
remember
ended up
that
working for Sony Pictures in Culver City.
So that's where I really remember, because you were driving down to, was it their Culver?
Culver, yeah.
Yeah, their Culver location. I had a buddy who was working there at the same time too, actually. And,
Armand, I think.
Oh man, I had 2 buddies actually. Yeah, it was one of them, and then his name was James. He was down there too. But that was a big boy job, because that was like corporate America, very corporate America. Right. Were you doing finance?
I was doing sales analyst. So I was a sales analyst. I was in their sales planning department for home entertainment. So everything that came after theatrical, I would manage. Me and my team would manage the sales of DVDs and Blu-ray discs, which eventually then led into VOD and all these digital medium,
Right. How long were you with Sony?
5 years.
Okay. So, I remember it being a long stint.
Yeah. That was my big, like you're saying, my big boy job, my corporate job, my experience to corporate America. I was like 23-ish when I started, and landing that job, which is funny because I had applied to Sony before, and I had a couple rejections before, just a generic email. Thank you for applying. We'll keep your resume.
Yeah.
We'll call you, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, that's fine.
Yeah.
But it didn't sort of discourage me to not apply again. I would apply again.
Sure.
I was just kind of hard-headed. I'm like, I'll apply
whatever.
again.
Yeah.
I'll go crazy. I'll go. I remember I was sitting in my room applying for 8 hours straight to jobs, literally applying, like no stop, just like that. It's a numbers game.
It totally is a numbers game.
And I'd modify all the cover letters and stuff, take time, and it's kind of interesting how it all worked. But that Sony also somehow changed my life. It changed my life because I learned a lot about the corporate America, but then being in a salary position, it opened the doors for a lot of things, which led to my first property investment.
I was going to say, so I know this is part of your journey, because obviously me being in insurance, that was one of the calls like, hey, I'm doing this, I need insurance for it, right? So did you, that first property you bought, was that all you, or did you have an investor with you?
So my first home, I knew I needed.
That was a primary home that you started.
My primary house that I still live in,
Yeah.
I knew I needed to buy a house. I mean, I read a couple books, Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah.
And I knew I had to buy a house. Somehow there was just a chip inside of me that said, you buy your first property, however the cost, whatever it costs, right? My father did help me with the down payment, but then I had to show the bank that I made the money.
Income, to make the payments.
The income. So that was the hardest part, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it is.
And so, it was hard. I had to save also for a few years. I had the same car, 1990 Nissan 300ZX, fully
cool,
built, 800 horsepower, daily driven.
Did you drive that down to Culver?
Daily driven. No. Culver City was.
But you had when I had a
Culver
BMW
City,
or something.
I bought a little beater. No, I had an Audi. I had an A4 Audi from Penske.
What it was.
When I bought the car, that BMW after buying the house.
Got it. That was that little like electric one, little
No. I had a 335 M Sport.
I don't remember that one.
Sedan. Yeah.
Was that after then you got that little electric vehicle?
I bought the electric vehicle after, but going back to that, so I knew I needed to buy the house. I had to save. For me, saving $40,000-$50,000 was just like insane. So I just had to save. I had another business which I forgot to mention. I was exporting cars to Peru. So me and my dad were like, hey, how are we figuring this out? Because college is not cheap, although it's cheap when you compare it to other schools. How are we paying for that? I already had a little apartment, and so I just kind of looked into. I like cars. So once again, focusing on what I like and how do I exploit that, right? So I just signed up with some insurance auctions like, IAI or Copart. Yeah. And we identified sort of like a segment in Lima, which was like the luxury, like the lower end luxury, like just entry level BMW sedans as something that was growing. And there was not really a lot of BMW dealerships back then. So it was very expensive to get one, like twice the money, right? Wow. So me and my dad were like, well, why don't we just buy stuff here? Crashed cars.
Fix it.
Total cars, basically.
Wow.
Send them over there and fix them over there. So that's what we did. We sort of kind of like, I was in charge of literally just picking the car, making sure it's not trashed. Airbags usually not deployed. Right. Because once they're deployed, it's just a pain.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
And then setting up a wholesale accounts with parts, getting the parts. I would go to the ports and put the parts in. I mean, I used to ship stuff from Long Beach, from Savannah, Georgia.
No way.
Wherever the opportunities of the cars were, that's where I would just buy them and then ship them, right? I learned a lot about shipping stuff, bill of lading, like roll-on, roll-offs, containers and stuff. And so that we didn't make tons of money, but we made money. It's a long process. A lot of grease payments needed to be done in Peru to just
get things
make
through.
the process fast. Yeah. It's kind of interesting how it all works there. And yes, it's a pain in the butt. It's more on that part in Peru, like making things work, and they'll just put some roadblocks just because they want more money.
Wants money, yeah.
Or the person that opens up shop, they won't move a finger unless they don't get like
just so you know, a grease payment is like it's a bribe payment.
It's a bribe payment, but it's sort of like
it's to make it go faster.
But it's like an understood, like accepted payment that everyone just takes, right? Yeah. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna bribe you and then you're gonna do something illegal. It's like, okay, if you do your job more efficiently, sure, I'm gonna pay you just for you to do your job. Yeah, which is not, it's crazy. But yeah, so that I was doing that in parallel. I was going to college, doing that, and also working. But anyways, once I was at Sony, I knew I needed to buy this house, and so saving was hard. I saved for a few years. Father, I was lucky enough that he did help me with a down payment as well, and I bought my first property in the Valley. And I was like, okay, how can I monetize this, right? Because I have now a house, 4-bedroom house.
Yeah, for yourself.
For myself. And I was like, I need to monetize this. So I just started renting rooms. Of course. Yeah. First friends, and I was like, wow, I'm renting rooms to friends, and how else can I monetize this? Yeah. So I added an ADU as well, and I started monetizing that, and I did that for like a year or two, and I was like, wow, it's growing great. I mean, everything is getting paid for. Right, you
were living probably for free at that point.
I was living with a positive cash flow. Right. So I was living for free and I was getting money. So I was like, wow, I have this supplemental income. Plus, I have my jobs, right? And I'm shipping cars and I'm working for Sony. So I'm like, this is great. Obviously, I gave up a lot. I gave up like my privacy. I gave up, not living by myself. I had to live with people. Right. Which a lot of people sort of like, I understand they take that as a pride. Like, hey, I want to have my own space. For me, I was like, I don't care. I just need to accelerate my path to like growth. Right. And how do I do that? Well, sure, I give up some other things, right? So I gave up that, and
well, you're a single guy. You're probably out most of the time. You're working, or you're out hanging out with friends. We're going on dates or whatever it is. Yeah, it's like whatever. I just need to sleep somewhere.
That's right, literally. And so that, and I actually, that's funny enough. At the beginning, I didn't even live in my master bedroom. I lived in one of the little rooms.
You're getting more rent for the other one.
That master bedroom. I was like, hey, why not? Oh, yeah. So I used to share a bathroom with a tenant/friend in my own house.
That's great.
And I at that point I was just like,
that's that hustle mentality,
doesn't
man.
Really matter.
Yeah, I get that. That's mad respect. Yeah, mad respect.
And I remember a girlfriend's like, wait, but this is your house. How come you don't have like your own master with your own bathroom? I'm like, well, I mean, this is like the mechanics as to why, right? And some people don't get that. And I was just like, I don't care. I'll be fine. Yeah. And so I sort of replicated that model after a few years of doing it. with a business partner of
Right.
mine who I met at Sony Pictures.
Oh, no
So once
way.
again, going back to Sony sort of like opened all these opportunities
Yeah.
for me. Salary, I was able to kind of buy a house because I had a good income, right? Then I met Andrew, which is one of my good buddies.
Right.
And he's a business partner of mine. And me and him we were put in a project together. It's like an incubator,
Sure.
1 month sort of project.
Okay.
And we needed to do things for the business, but at the same time, we kind of like met and we sort of connected and we're like, hey, why don't we buy a house? I'm looking to buy a house. Do you want to buy a house? Sure. And he's from England or South
Okay,
Africa.
sure.
So he also came with the mentality of like, hey,
I need property.
I need to properties
Yeah.
and do stuff. You know, what else am I going to do? So the first home I bought was in 2014. And then I bought this with Andrew 2016. So we bought our first single family home,
Right.
4-bedroom house, also in the Valley, 50-50. And replicated the model that I've done.
Right.
And so we did the same thing. We added an ADU and then we rented. What we did was, and this is sort of like for everyone to know, I mean, we rented the house by the room. And that's how you could extract a lot more money.
Of course.
A lot more work.
Yeah.
But
It's more humans.
It's more humans, more liability, more work, more
Yeah.
everything,
Yeah.
and more money, and more headaches. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's just more cash flow,
Yeah.
right? And so at the beginning, you just want to kind of get out of that hole of paying that mortgage,
Totally.
which at the beginning is high
Oh, yeah.
in relation to rent, right? And so we just wanted to replicate that, and that worked well. So when we ended up buying 2 more,
Right. Same thing, room by room.
I ran by room,
Yeah.
so everything by room, and so when buying the house, always trying to look at, you know, if the space is big, how are the rooms?
What's it gonna look like to share that space?
What's it
Yeah.
gonna look to share? Is the garage big enough, or we could kind of do an ADU? How much would that cost?
Right.
And so that was our angle. That was all working amazing until sort of like we led into the pandemic in 2020. So we stopped really buying houses. And the pandemic also affected us with rent and folks who couldn't
Didn't wanna pay, yeah.
and didn't want to pay, but then also had new cars but didn't want to pay rent.
Yeah,
so as a mom and pop sort of, you know, landlord.
Yeah, it comes
it's
screeching to all. I get it.
terrible.
I get it.
Terrible. We had to pay, you know, a lot of things out of pocket and having people that were just taking advantage of us, to be honest with you. And I get it. I mean, if it's legal, you take advantage of it. You know, I can't blame them. I could only blame like our lawmakers or whatever it may be. But it wasn't really fair for us because we didn't get any help.
No, I mean they were giving PPP money or whatever, but still, like when you look at it, like the cash flowing business was always the thing that made you feel better and sleep better at night,
And
right?
survive.
Like, and
If
survive.
I have no cash flow, I can't pay for anything.
I have a big apartment schedule I insure, and they had like 2,500 doors as part of their portfolio, and they had like 60% of the rent coming in. Can you imagine the tension from going from like a 90 to 5-ish%, you know, occupancy, and then just
Almost
overnight.
half, yeah.
It's terrifying, right?
it's terrible.
But anyway, so you went through that. You still have those 3 rentals,
I do, yeah.
and then you have your primary still.
That's right.
So you have a little portfolio there.
Yes.
And then at what point did you decide, I guess it was after or during the pandemic, that Ringaro was going to be something that you were going to go chase after?
It was actually before the pandemic.
Okay.
It was in 2017.
Oh, wow.
When I guess I could call it I got lucky, right? But
Okay.
lucky for me means, you know, being prepared.
Prepare, yes. Opportunity
when the
seizing,
opportunity
yeah.
comes, right? So I had the chance to meet my business partner for Ringaro, another person, not the
Okay.
person that I partnered with the houses, and he was already in telecom, just the old telecom, right?
Sure.
I was working at Sony. I was fine. I was managing some houses, some tenants. I was working, you know, my
Yeah.
salary job, working Monday through Friday, commuting to Culver City, and then this opportunity comes around, and this was towards the end cycle of Sony, right? 2017. I think I was already there for 3 years, and he goes, "Hey, look, I come from telecom, but it's the old telecom, and there's this new telecom. The new telecom is called VoIP,
VoIP, right.
Voice over IP, which is telephony through the internet. Before it was all through PBX,
Landlines,
copper,
yeah.
landlines, and
Yeah.
all that. And so, hey, you wanna kind of start a new business, right? And so at that point, I was like, there's an opportunity that comes to me, and thankfully I'm ready because I could, in essence, in my mind, my scenario was if everything goes bad, and I lose my job or I quit my job to start this
You have a
startup,
free place to stay.
I have a place to stay and I have some properties that I manage that I could at least have some cash flow and I have this cushion, right, where I could at least survive.
Right.
So I'm not 100%
Right, dead in the water.
dead in the water
Right.
by myself. At that point, as soon as I graduated college, by the way, my dad was like, "You're on your own. I'm sorry, I can't help you anymore," which is great, perfect. So I knew I was like, okay, I have this portfolio of properties. I didn't want to be, I needed to be careful, but I've always had, and I still have this sense of like risking. I want to risk because why not? I've always had this thing of like, yeah, I don't need to plan ahead. Although I plan ahead more now than before. Sure. But before it's like just now. I want to risk now.
I'll figure it out.
I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Actually, when I bought this property with my friend, the first property, I took all my 401k.
Oh, sure.
All of it.
Yeah.
I paid the fees. I paid the taxes, all that. I just took it out. People were like, "You're crazy. Your 401k. What are you doing?"
Nothing appreciates like California real estate.
I don't really care. That was the only money I could take. I mean, I actually borrowed from some friends as well. And I was like, I was pretending that I had this money to my friends. Like, yeah, I have the money. Yeah. Let's go halves. It's all good. And I just needed to make it happen. So I made it happen. Yeah. And then I had to pay back my friends, and the 401k, I didn't really care because I was like, I had some money there, and I'm like, what am I going to do with that money? I mean, today I need it. I can't wait till I'm 62.
I just had this conversation with somebody at the beach. They were like, I need to buy a house. I'm like, what's your 401k got in it? And they were like, what? And by the way, his employer's been matching it for the past 3 years. It's like, no idea. Dude, access it. When you're trying to buy real estate, the thing that matters, the thing that matters is the down payment. Yeah. That's the hardest thing. Yeah. So I think it's great. I don't get mad at people when they pull 401k for that kind of thing.
Right.
If you were buying it if you're doing it to buy cars or whatever, I'd be like, hey, what are you doing?
For something that's not an investment.
Right.
That's for sure. Yeah. So I took that investment and put it on another investment.
Yeah, it's great.
So yeah, I mean, that was great. But going back to when I had this opportunity to start Ringaro Telecom, I knew I had this cushion. So I wasn't gonna risk it all basically, but I could just go back to something, right? And so I accepted, and then I was working for Sony. Okay. I was shipping cars, I was managing my houses, and I started my company all at the same time. I was just doing all at the same time. So I had no life. I remember back then I didn't really go partying. I didn't really go out. I was just working. Yeah. Like working. My life was just working. That's basically what it was. And so I was doing Ringaro while I was working at Sony. Sorry, Sony people.
Too late now.
And
thanks for the 401k.
And the matching. And so I sometimes I would bring my laptop, my personal laptop, and just do both jobs. I mean, I was doing my Sony job for sure, but I was making this Ringaro thing grow. Sure. Right. And it got to a point where I grew enough where I'm like, wow, I just need to put all of my time on Ringaro. Right. So I have to quit Sony, which was another big decision, which people thought I was crazy again. It's like, wow, I've been wanting to work for Sony for all these years, and you're quitting. And so, yeah, I mean, something that I learned about Sony though is to break the rules again. I broke so many rules at Sony. Really? Yeah. I wouldn't go to certain meetings, and people thought I was crazy, and I would just always push back. I'm like, I don't need to go to that meeting. Yeah, but you're part of the team. Yeah, I get it, but I have more productive. I need to do more things that are more productive for the business, and me sitting in a meeting, I could just read the minutes, right? Or you could just tell me what I need to do or whatever. It doesn't matter. But
give me the cliff notes.
Yeah, give me the cliff notes, or don't give me the cliff notes. I don't really care. But I have other things that I could kind of work on. And that sort of led to also me getting promoted a lot in Sony. Like I got promoted every year, basically. Really? I had a patent. I have a patent, which I created while I was at Sony. And I think that was just like my mentality of, I guess I'm an entrepreneur, but I have this entrepreneur mindset, right? I'm not like a serial entrepreneur or anything crazy, but I always like to think outside the box, break rules, risk it. I mean, I've been fired from so many jobs because I was just breaking the rules. Actually, I got fired from Verizon. I got fired from Sears. I got fired from HRT Textron. I swear.
Is it just not being compliant in that regard?
Certain things, not compliant because I just was doing things in my mind that, hey, they're more efficient. Sure, I'm breaking I'm rubbing people the wrong way, but I'm making my best efforts to make it better. Yeah. And so when that time came, it was always a shock. It was like, what? Why? No, you got to talk to HR, blah, blah, blah. You can't be doing this. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like literally, let's move on. Right? Yeah. Sony was the only one I didn't get fired for. Although I had a lot of talks with my management. But yeah, I mean, I've learned to kind of break the rules a little bit, be a little entrepreneur, and just doing my own thing. Like just being this person just with my own little mission. Everyone was like, I just see everyone as I was working. Oh, hi, I'm 8 to 5. And I'm like just doing my own thing.
So at my previous job, I don't know if we had talked about it a lot, but they were more old school what they did. And I really wanted to like move it into the 21st century, use technology better. And I also was the only like real, like true driver in that business. I was like a black sheep, a bull in a china shop. And it was constant chaos. I created the chaos. People hated it. I was rubbing people the wrong way. So I felt a little bit, now at the time I was like, man, something's wrong with me. Like I didn't know, I'm not a purebred entrepreneur either. So I'm like, I'm just broken, and I don't know, I just create chaos. But as I've developed, I would say, yeah, that entrepreneurial mindset was there because I'm also not a serial entrepreneur.
Right.
Like this is my only business that I've ever had. Now it's going well, but I remember being able to be free of it, doing what I wanted to do and letting it go. And then just watching like, oh, this makes sense. But I did rub people the wrong way. So I remember what that feeling was like.
Same thing with me. I was already like just used to it. But always working towards my next, okay, well, what am I doing here? I'm being productive. I'm helping the business. I need a promotion. And if you're not giving me a promotion, I'm going somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I learned to always work with upper management, making them look better, helping them. I'm always going outside of my little bubble.
Sure.
Always go to different departments, talk to other managers there. Like, hey, how can I deal with this person in my department?
Smart. Well, corporate, you can get put in your little space. That's it.
You are in your little silo, and you can't really get out. And if you get out, you get scolded. Like, what are you doing? You can't be like, you can't just be talking to my manager.
Right.
I did that all the time. Literally, I was just talking to the manager of the manager of the manager, VPs, EVPs. I had coffees with EVPs and talk about my VPs or my executive directors, because why not? But in my mindset, I was like, I don't care. I gotta do this because I gotta communicate.
Sure.
And at the same time, I was like, hey, you can't be doing that. You gotta follow protocol, or before sending emails to like the president on sales, for example, or even EVPs or VPs. They would always wanted to see it. Let me see the email before you send it. Let me see the email.
That's the political game too.
I hated that so much that towards the end at Sony, I just sent them. I could care less. And then, what's the worst that could happen? If something happens that's bad, guess what? I'll get feedback. I'll learn from my mistakes, and I'll be extra careful next time.
Yeah.
But if I keep just getting corrected by someone and I don't get to
Who's
suffer.
trying to play a political game too,
of
typically.
course, they're playing political. They're trying to push their whatever is best for them. I'm just trying to be bottoms up,
right?
Not tops down. Like I wanted to be like truthful. This is what's happening. Yeah, you thought there was going to be 30% growth. No, there's like 5% growth.
Right.
This is what it is. So this is the truth. Not try to,
spin it.
Yeah, spin it around to like a better story. But yeah, so I learned that.
So Ringaro, real quick. You had a business partner? Do you still have that business partner?
Yeah. Business partner, we're 50-50.
Okay.
And so started that while I was at Sony in 2017. Okay. Got to a point where I knew I had to quit Sony and just dedicated my time fully at Ringaro.
Okay.
Stopped exporting cars. So I just ended up with Ringaro and then just being a property manager.
Right.
Yeah. And so, Ringaro, it's been great. It's a voice over IP telecom provider.
Yep.
And we are a provider. So a lot of folks think that, oh, yeah, you're in telecom. So what do you do, or who do you resell for, right? They don't really understand that you could also be a provider.
Right.
The entry to this industry, the entry barrier is very high. It's very complex. Obviously, I didn't have the know-how. Sure. My business partner did, which was a great opportunity for me. If I could just manage the business, all the front end of the business, right? All the operations, all the analysis, everything else, right? He could kind of assist, or he assisted with all the paperwork and signing up, the federal stuff. The bureaucracy is crazy.
I know, I get it.
Paperwork and you getting permits and codes and it's just crazy. Taxation is insane for telecom. It's insane. You pay into entities, you pay into cities, you pay into like all these different buckets.
I had no
idea.
You
have to have agents in different states. We have like a taxation compliance company that takes care of all of this.
Wow.
And then they pay into all these different entities. It's just insane, right? But so the entry is hard to get into this business if you're going to be a telecom provider.
Sure.
If you're natively going to provide the service. So we provide phone service. We can provide it with a phone number. We have our own infrastructure. We have our own hardware and all that. So we can control a lot of the
variables,
the variables, the costs, and all of that. So that's we started from the beginning. It was very expensive. we had to put a lot of cash
I'm sure.
up front. So once again, I needed to.
It's all that risk right there.
So
yeah.
guess what I did? I didn't have a 401k then.
Okay.
I was still, I think, paying some back from one of the properties that I had bought, right? And my only scenario was getting a HELOC.
Yeah, I can see that coming.
So I got a HELOC out of my house, which again, people were like, "You're crazy. You're putting your primary home at risk." And I'm like, I have no other way of getting the money. Nobody's gonna lend me money at 25, and it's just impossible. So I just got a HELOC. So I took a big amount of money against my house. And I said, I don't care. Let's go. I mean, I have to. Otherwise, how do I accelerate?
Yep.
So I just took it all. The next day I was funded. The next day it was gone. Literally. And that's how I started. That's how it helped me start Ringaro. So at the end of the day, buying this first property helped me with a lot of things. First, cash flow, not paying rent for a couple of years.
Building equity,
right? The properties, value go up. I'm paying down the mortgage. And then you use it as a bank account.
Yeah,
That's
dude,
insane.
it's incredible. Well, and also the HELOC is a deduction against your tax because it's interest.
And it's a deduction because it's interest payment. It's just like
it all works.
You win everywhere, right? This is like the American model of like just
getting money
credit.
is the important part. I've always said that making the payments on stuff is not the hard part. It's getting the money.
Cash makes money. You have no cash, you're dead. You're dead.
Yep.
You can't do anything.
Totally.
I mean, you could get it borrowed, but you have.
So
to have
my wife and I are actually right now looking at doing this basically the same thing where I'm going to take a HELOC loan. I want to get more fixed because I want to rent my current house, move up to the next one, and it's like people are like, man, that's a little risky. I'm like, that's the point.
Yeah.
Like it's all risky. Also, I think there's a risk for not doing something.
Oh, that's a higher risk, I think,
in my opinion as well. Right? I think that's that
100%,
entrepreneurial tick of like, well, I don't want to be stuck here forever. That's a bigger risk to me.
What's the opportunity cost on that, right? Like, if I don't do this versus if I do that, you should just go.
Well, then also the emotional. So I don't know if you do this, but I have buyer's remorse like crazy. If I don't feel like I bought the right thing, I get buyer's remorse so bad. Like, so I always buy the nicer of the thing because I don't want to look back and go, oh, I didn't buy the right thing.
Right.
So I have that with my life. I'm like, I get really worried that I'll look back at something and go, I didn't.
How do you do with Amazon shopping? Do you buy, if you're buying something for...
So typically if I'm going to buy something on Amazon, I don't care about it.
But is this pretty pricey or...
See, again, I'm not buying like cars on Amazon, or I'm not buying like car parts where I'm like, hey, maybe I'll save some money on this, like,
I see.
Exhaust or whatever. Like, I always go for the nicer thing. I'm always worried about being. So anyway, all that to say, it does translate to my life. I'm always worried about I didn't do enough. I'm gonna look back and regret. I wish I would have done this. I don't have much of that because I've kind of moved the needle so fast. You know.
Yeah.
So anyway, so you got the HELOC done, couple $100,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, being in my mid-20s, that's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. No, it's scary.
It's scary, a lot of money, and that's when you start accumulating debt. But then you start realizing that debt is definitely a way of getting
a huge tool.
Getting out of the hole and just accelerating growth, right?
With another side note, we have a business consultant. I've been running the business no debt. I started it no debt. I took money from a house that I had sold and funded the business, so no debt. We were running it no debt. We got through a couple years and we were doing really good. And he's like, hey, your balance sheet is lazy. And I was like, what does that mean? He's like, you have no debt. I'm like, that's good. He's like, it's not good. And I'm like, wait, run it by me. Like, I don't understand. I was really having a hard time. He goes, you need to be growing. You need to take debt, make that balance sheet look a little bit more sketchy, but you need to be hiring more people, which then turns revenue. He goes, when we see people with no debt, we actually think lazy balance sheet.
That's interesting.
That's really fascinating, right? So people who want to buy agencies want to know that you have some debt and that you're growing the business.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, fat. So I took $500,000 in debt, to like go hire people. And it was good. Like, and he was right. And I think debt is a good tool if you're using it properly. Everyone knows that. But I'm not one of those guys either who's like, oh, no, you have to have cash like on hand to like, I'll figure it out.
Right.
Give me somewhere to access the money and I'll figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good learning point, right? Because I always use debt, but for my business, we're also debt free.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess maybe it's the intricacies of me and my business partners. It's much older than me, so he's at a different cycle.
Life cycle for sure is important.
He wants to probably just get off at some point soon. Doesn't want to accumulate any more debt.
Yeah,
and so it's hard to sort of kind of agree on getting debt because I'm more
Yeah, you still got a long time to go.
I'll be fine with risk, and he doesn't want to sign up with that. So it's interesting, but definitely looking into doing that because with no debt, you can't inject more money, which then you can't hire more people,
right,
which then you can grow.
Exactly
and
right.
Then it's just like it's a cycle of.
Well, actually, it's like property, right? When you buy a property, you have all this depreciation built into it and all these write-offs. Well, the debt becomes your write-off within the business to then grow it, so you can hide money from Uncle Sam, and you're growing the bit. Like that's the American way,
that's the American
right there.
Way,
yeah. So anyway, so you started Ringaro in 2017. I'm assuming that was a couple years later than you quit Sony, or is it like right after that?
Yeah, I quit Sony in 2018.
Okay.
So it was like a year and a half.
Okay.
I was doing.
How was COVID? Because that was like obviously infant stage business in 2019, 18, 19.
18, 19, infant. Yeah, we were growing, but I think COVID helped us for sure. Yeah.
Oh, because you had to go from manual to
you
analog
had to go from analog
to
digital. So people were being sent home to work from home, and if you didn't have like a voice over IP system, well, you can't take calls at home either from the computer or your mobile app, right, or a desk phone that you could take home.
Right.
So I think that helped us for sure. So that was sort of, that was great.
That was a good thing. Okay, cool.
It's not like, oh my God, because of COVID, I did everything. No, it just helped for sure. And people didn't want to spend, business owners didn't want to spend the money. And voice over IP is, in comparison to traditional telephony, is much cheaper. It's more accessible. It's more flexible. So we converted a lot of customers basically.
That's cool. So who are your customers? Speaking of that, like, do you have a main like industry focus, or is it kind of anybody really at this point?
Yeah, it's industry wide. Our focus is more small to medium.
Sure.
Our breadth of customers goes from hospitals, schools, auto dealerships to small restaurants. It's insurance agency.
It can be anywhere. Yeah,
it could be anything.
Yeah.
I think we provided services to you guys until you got merged.
Yeah,
but it could just be anyone. Mm-hmm. We tend not to go to the large businesses because they tend to have contracts with IT companies and things. But this is our sort of like our wide breadth.
Sure.
The reason why is because we partner up with a lot of IT companies, and we dive into their clients and their contacts, right?
Well, I guess to a certain degree, it doesn't really matter the industry for you. Like, do you need a phone?
Matter.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
I know there's some telecom businesses that only
they niche down
with niche to hospitals
sure.
only hospitals, or only auto dealerships, which I get, but I don't want to limit myself in that. I want to be able to provide services to anyone.
Sure.
So. I'd say that 80% of our business is in California, 20% is in other states.
Okay.
But we do have businesses in other states.
Okay.
We provide services in South America as well.
Really?
It's kind of interesting. We have a few customers who have call centers. So basically, they're just operating as if they were in the U.S.
Sure. Sure.
But they're in either in Chile, Peru, Argentina, and we have some in Spain. A couple businesses in Spain as well.
That's fascinating.
That's kind of interesting.
That's really cool.
With VoIP, you could do all of these things.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't. And a VPN, it's like between that, like what? How are you gonna know?
They have no idea.
Yeah.
Although VPNs they don't really need, but sure, yeah. There's ways of doing it with the digital.
Cool. So we always talk about, on top of that, like differentiator for your business. Obviously, when we were working together, you were very much like, no, if you have a problem, I will fix it. That was very much your pitch. Yeah. Do you feel like that's differentiator between you and Ring Central or Spectrum or whoever else it is? Like, what's your pitch to people?
No, Ringaro is a boutique telecom company that provides a white glove service without the boutique price.
Right.
That was my first angle and my DNA from like day one, because I had experienced a lot of all these calling my service provider, even my internet service provider at home, and being on hold for like an hour, 2 hours while at work or one of my jobs. I remember calling one time to say AT&T and just getting jumped from one department to the other, and one's like, oh, sorry, this is the wrong thing, hang up, calling again. And I had this sort of like, why does it have to be that way? They understood that small and medium businesses, they need responsive, proactive tools and support. They can't be waiting for something to break and then call, right? So when we started the business, we knew that we wanted to provide services to businesses that we could only maintain a high service level to. We wouldn't just be selling to anyone. We could sell to anyone,
right?
But what's the point of selling to someone that I know
if they have a bad
infrastructure is bad, or their IT is not up to par, and they don't want to spend any money on that? I just
It's a
don't.
bad experience waiting to happen.
It's a bad experience for them. We look bad.
Yep.
They think it's not, their stuff, it's us. So honestly, from my sales experience, I've never had to go through this where I have to say, hey, I can't provide you services. But now I do, and I happily do, because I don't want to have customers upset. I don't want to have customers calling me and say, hey, this is not working.
Right.
So from the get-go, we say, hey, this is what you have. Okay, this is what you need. If you want a really good experience, this is what you need. And if you can't have that, we can't provide you services. You can go to Ring Central if you want.
Right.
That'd be perfect. Go for it. And you're going to have the same problems. But so that, I think that's sort of like what we're a little different, because we're not just a telecom company. We also do have a little bit into the IT of the customer.
Right.
So we want to be sure that there's certain things that are turned on, turned off, and there's certain hardware there for us to kind of be proactive about the customers, infrastructure, internet connection, and phones. You probably know.
I know, yeah. Well, you did that with us, right? And I remember going, "Wait, what do I have to plug in?" Like we were working through all of it, and you were really into the system,
right? We are, because we want that service, that high service level, right? And obviously, some businesses have their own IT folks that manage that, and that's fine too. But
you're assessing that, right? Like if they already have something good, you're like, okay, I can work with that, and you'll be fine.
We
We'll
have
be fine,
to assess
right?
that. We can't just be like, oh, you want phones? Here you go.
Turn it on.
Okay, turn it on. Yeah,
Right.
plug it in. Which is a lot of these bigger companies, tele companies, and honestly, one of the reasons why we're still in business and we're growing is because the 8x8, the Ring Centrals, the Nextiva of the world, they'll just ship you phones, and then if you don't pay this extra package of support, which almost no small business will buy, then you're just a plug and play type of customer. And if something is wrong, they'll say, well, talk to your IT. Well, they don't have an IT, or they don't know anything about computers or networks, right? And now they're like, oh, wow, Nextiva sucks, or the service with Nextiva sucks. With, in theory, their service works, but it also sucks that they're not upfront and they're not telling the customer, or they're not transparent. Right. Like, hey, you're going to need this. This just doesn't work. You can't just be using cellular internet, right? Which a lot of people are using now, the 5G sort of little towers. Yeah. And they have a business of 20 customers doing video calls and phone calls. It's just a recipe for disaster. I think that's sort of kind of what makes us different from the competition.
Cool. And then where do you see the future of Ringaro? I guess kind of like wrapping it up. I know you talked. We're not going to talk revenue, because I know that was like we're in the 7 digits. We at least do that. But what do you see the future for Ringaro, or even the telecommunication industry?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? That I think the telecom industry, it's going through a change where there's a lot of mergers and acquisitions happening, which is good news for us because the multipliers are getting higher, and so all these contracts are now more, they're just worth more. We're just keeping a steady state. Our pace is growth. Every quarter we're growing. So we grow steadily but surely. And I think at some point there might be an exit strategy. I haven't discussed that yet. I think before that we want to bring in more folks in, dilute some of our ownership and make it grow, right? And so that's sort of like our angle. So right now,
that's what Greyhawk does.
I know,
and it's a really positive
learn
thing.
From you guys.
No, man. Well, it's like I just don't. You treat the business different when you're an owner. It's like that's the reality. Like when you're an employee, you think different. So I'm trying to bring people in to treat it like their business and go, hey, like let's maximize it.
I know
it works. Other people do it. Attorney firms, CPAs. A whole bunch of businesses do it, and you have people who really care. That's what I really want.
I think that's key. That the people you bring in is key, right? That's probably that's the most important part.
Yeah, tech's important, but like the people that are operating the business and the way you want it to be operated, honest, ethical, working hard, like that's the real kicker.
It's the image of your business.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly right.
It's basically an extension of you, which is sort of like that's definitely the goal.
Okay. Well, dude, it was really cool getting to kind of reminisce on kind of our history together. I'm really happy to see that you're doing well. Like entrepreneurship is so cool now that I've been doing it, and it's really fun to hear other people's stories, and I'm really happy for you. And I guess if it sounds weird, like I'm proud of you. Like it's cool. Like it's fun to watch people do it and like succeed in it. So thanks for coming through, and I hope you guys all enjoyed that. And someone else who's taking some serious risk and taking money out of houses and all that, like it works. Don't be a Dave Ramsey guy. So anyway, Cesar, thanks, buddy, and hope you all enjoyed it. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you, guys.
See ya.